Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I am your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and it is August 9th. Excited to be in the month of August with you. As I talked about last week, it is National Wellness Month. So I'm going to continue with that theme today with my friend here, Suzanne Morrell. She is a climate reality leader who is committed to making the events industry more sustainable. And she is founder and owner of Creating Environments. Hello, my friend.
Hello, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Tracy, for having me.
You're welcome. I told you this was the National Wellness Month, but I think it really ties into sustainability. And I wanted to talk to you about that, how wellness ties into sustainability, because it is part of the Sustainable Development Goals. But I also want to talk about if willing, your health situation that has also helped you refocus and really think about wellness in your events as well. So let's start off with National Wellness Month. What does that mean to you as it relates to sustainability?
Well, if you think of sustainability as three pillars, we have people, planet, the environment, and prosperity, profit. And we're focused really on the environmental aspect when we think of sustainability in events. But we really are forgetting that without people, we have no events. Without people that work the events and put them on, you don't have an event. Without people attending your events, you don't have an event or conference. So people, to me, is one of the most important things, and taking care of those people. So you have, sustainability means continuing on. Without that important component, we don't have events.
Oh, that's a really good point. I mean, because we don't have robots that can design all of these things at this point, right? To do that. So we
not yet.
Not yet, exactly. And we don't necessarily want them to take over every single job, but yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And it is a big part of what we do because events are designed to bring people together.
Exactly.
And so what ways are you seeing in looking at its sustainability that wellness is being brought into the event design?
Well, what I'm seeing, traditionally is the wellness, on a larger level. Like, are we having breaks in between sessions? The design of the food, are we, providing enough breaks for people? But I think we can go a little step further. We can actually choose our menus. So, that afternoon coffee break, so we're not having, brownies. And that's, so really choose menus that are brain healthy. And, I come, as Tracy mentioned, speaking from experience, I've just last year had a very traumatic brain incident where I had a brain hemorrhage caused by a rupture, which caused a brain bleed, which means I had a stroke. And
wow,
recovering from that for the past year and a half has been really challenging. And coming back to events after that, like Tracy mentioned, I'm seeing things in a completely an enlightened way, more so than I had before. And I think we all take, when we design our events, the guest experience, the entryway, moving around the event, what makes it easy for them. But really taking it a step further, I think, is important because we overlook so many simple things.
Yeah. And you and I were at a convention together earlier this year and just talking, and I don't even remember any examples that we had from that, but going through that event with you and watching you experience that and what you need for not only your mental health, but physicality as well, right? Getting through those events.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm, for one, signage is really important. When traditionally we design signs, it's, a room number and an arrow, but you might have somebody with visual deficits, and, looking at those color combinations or the signs busy? Is there maybe an identifier that, like if you're on an environmental track, maybe you could have a picture, a watermark of a tree on all those signs. So you can just identify that, and it makes it a little easier to navigate signs, big letter brewers and a big giant arrow.
Right.
So there's things like that. Navigating through tables is another issue.
Yeah. Yeah, because typically we put the stanchions on there with the big number on it, but it's really hard to find in a big room of people. Right?
Exactly.
How do you manage that? Yeah.
And coming off of COVID, I know there's a lot of staffing issues, and we don't have enough staff sometimes. So having a human wayfinder isn't always practical or available. So really thinking of how you can make it easier for the guests who get there. And you may not know who has deficits or not. I do not shout this out when I go to an event. I want to do things on my own, and I want to navigate it. And I don't want to be a trouble to the event organizers. And a lot of your guests are going to feel that way. And so when they're registering, they may not check that box that they need special accommodations, because we're proud. We're proud. Anybody who has had a disability, we just want to do it. Now, it's another thing if it's a visible disability, and you really do need some, if you need ramps or something like that. But I think it's something that, just taking that little extra step. And what's good for someone with an invisible disability or a visible disability, that's going to be good for all of your guests. So think of it that way. So redesigning simple things like, easier signage and, access, maybe, where are the restrooms, and, keeping those nearby to where your meetings are, like in most convention centers and hotels are.
Yeah. And I think that it goes a long way in thinking about that. And it's hard to, having planned events for more than 30 years now, I'm like, it's not something that I thought about before I had my own food allergies, right? Planning those menus. But it is really trying to find individuals like yourself or me with food allergies, and I know you've got a food allergy to cilantro. Is that right?
Crazy food allergy.
Right. Finding people to come and test your event out, right? Or get the different experiences so that you can be in that inclusive experience to provide better wellness, because that's what it really is about providing accommodations for individuals who have a disability of any kind is a form of wellness.
Exactly. And, something else that, came to mind as a result of, the COVID issues is, access to fresh water. And I know, convention centers and hotels now, you'll have the big, bubblers of water, but, they cost a fortune. And we need to do better. We need to do better with our event partners to find out a way, can this just be provided for anybody who's in the building? I mean, that's something for a healthy building to have access to fresh water. And sometimes those old water fountains that have been around since the 1950s, I don't want to get water from them. I don't know where the pipes are from, but they make new fresh, the water refill stations. Those should be everywhere and visible, and they, should just be just included in whatever venue you're renting, for your event. So fresh water and mobility, being able to move around, having those elevator signs and escalator signs, easier to read. Sometimes, they're so cryptic, with the little bubble people, it's hard to read sometimes.
It really is. And signage really plays a big part in helping people get around places. And a story I use all the time is my friend Elisa, to get to the food and beverage function in an event, this was back in 2016, she had to go into the back of the house, down the staff hallway, down an staff elevator or the freight elevator, down another hallway, down to get to the space. Whereas, can we think about how that access is? Not that you're going to give all the attendees that access, but can you pick a different location then, right?
Exactly. And what that does, it gives her a different event experience than the rest of the guests. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
whole point of this is everybody should have the same guest experience. You don't
Mm-hmm.
want, she then was burdened to get to someplace where it was, someplace that was part of the whole function. And,
Right.
if someone has visual disabilities or sound and light, if they're affected with sound and light, certainly if you're at a rock concert, having somebody have that same experience if they have to put earphones on or dark glasses might be a little different. So you can't really adjust that experience. But I think in terms of food and beverage and accessibilities at meetings, which are pretty cut and dry,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
a simple tweak in a design is easy to do.
Right. And I actually just posted today, designing menus. I went to the New Bern Craven County Tourism Development Authority meeting, and the representative from the Doubletree Hotel was there. And I don't know if you saw the story, but last week, Doubletree on National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day announced their new allergy-friendly cookie that they will be giving out when people check in to Doubletrees, because they're known for that Doubletree or for that cookie. And the company they partner with is called Partake. But I'm like, for 20 years, I haven't been able to partake in that welcoming experience with Doubletree because of a food allergy. But now I can.
And I guarantee you it's going to taste the same. And
Yeah.
the other guests who taste that won't know the difference. And that's
Right.
something that, that has been tested with menus. For example, for vegan or vegetarian menus, if you put it on a menu and you call it something different, people are going to order it. If you call it vegan something, or if you, versus, pasta primavera,
Right.
or something else, people won't know the difference that it's, a vegan or,
Yeah.
so it won't hurt the sales or the consumption
Right.
of something.
Well, and this one will be served in a prepackaged in a package, so to avoid cross contamination against their signature cookie. But there was actually a study that just came out last week, and Julian shared it with me, about a woman at MIT who did a study, is that when you put the word vegan or vegetarian next to the dish, it actually dropped the percentage of people who chose that. Which I thought was quite interesting. I'm trying to get her on the show to talk about that.
Yeah, I'll pass on some information to you too, because there has been a lot of a lot of studies in Europe about that as well, and they've tested menus in restaurants.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about wellness, as again, it's not just or your let's have yoga in the morning. I mean, that's not what I think of when I think of wellness at events. I think of the whole design of the event, but I also think of the facility that you're in. I think of what's the air quality like. Has that HVAC system been tested, and am I breathing in fresh air, fresh water? So I'm looking at the core things. I mean, the stretch breaks and yoga in the morning is nice to have, and your spa water is a nice to have. But again, I want to make sure that facility that I'm going to be spending hours of my life in is going to be safe for me.
Right. That's a really good point. And what kind of questions can you ask a property about that?
I think if you are booking a property, you can ask them, when was the last time their HVAC system was tested? I actually carry around, I don't have it actually with me at the moment, but I carry around a little air quality meter. It's, about this big, and it tests the CO2 levels. So you'll know, if you're getting fresh quality air. And I tested it at home one day. I was panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got the windows closed. I'm not getting any fresh air. I'm going to breathe in all I'm going to use up all my oxygen. How am I getting oxygen? So, immediately opened all the windows and, so I thought about that at home, and, indoor air quality is something that is, in recent years has been getting a lot of attention. And a lot of older buildings and newer buildings aren't, they may not be up to speed. Air quality is something that's important.
Well, and I also, I don't know why this just popped into my head, but thinking about, new builds with the carpeting or the paint, and how has that venue been quote unquote fumigated to remove those chemicals that are in the glue that puts the carpet down, or all of those things too, because that's going to affect the air quality as well. Is that right?
Absolutely. And that's, with that takes years for
Okay.
those VOCs to disseminate. But you can get air cleaners and, air purifiers.
Mhm.
I think we all have them now, with that, clean the air every 15 minutes. And,
Mhm.
that should just be part of the HVAC systems, and sometimes with UV lights if they're, to kill any viruses that might be floating around the air as
Mhm.
well.
So on the wellness aspect of venue, besides the water and the air, is there anything else that we should be thinking about?
Sure, making sure that there are, that when you're designing your event, that you want to make sure people can get up and walk around and move around, so they're not
Okay.
sitting in a theater style room without being able to get up and move. So think about the design of your event. We have had the same template since the industrial age with,
Yes.
you start off with your continental breakfast, you go into a plenary, you get a coffee break, go back to a plenary, then and have lunch, and then you might have some breakouts in the afternoon. But we have the same template. But think about this: are your guests able to get up and move around? Because sitting for too long of a time is not healthy for anyone.
No, not at
So
all.
being able
Yeah.
to move, being able to and I don't mean having like a jogging break in the afternoon. I mean, that's nice to have, but again, you don't need to do anything super special. Just make it so they can get up and move. And whether that means you can get up during your event and go get a glass of water,
Hmm.
or get a cup of coffee without having to disturb the rest of your meeting. Just to
Right.
encourage movement. Um,
Yep.
you know,
Well, and that's what this little thing does every hour, right? It's just encouraging movement for just 1 minute,
Right. And
right?
yeah, again, I've seen it. I've seen some where they have, somebody get up on stage and, have everyone do a
Right.
stretch break. That's fine. But you know what? That gets, it's got to be appropriate to your event. And it's not always appropriate, to your
Right.
audience to be
Right.
doing something like that. Sometimes it's fun. But, get people to get up and move around, whether that be in the back of the room, having high boy tables where people can stand and
Right.
listen to the meeting as opposed to sitting in their theater style seats.
Well, and that just reminded me that years ago when I was in Atlanta and I was teaching the kids cooking camp during the summer, and one of the weeks, one summer, I was like, they were all stressing out because they're prepping, and at 12 o'clock, because it was like from 10 to 2, 12 o'clock, I'm like, all right, everybody stop. And these are like 9 to 14-year-olds. I'm like, everybody stop. Now take a deep breath in and let it out. And then we did, what's the one where you bend over sun morning, um, yoga breathing, right? And I did that on one day. And then every day at 12 o'clock, they were like, Tracy, are we going to do our yoga breathing? I mean, and it was just, it helped them on the day that they were in competition, right? Because they could take that break and really then come back and focus on what they were doing
Yeah,
without the stress.
exactly. And going through what I've gone through a lot of very fascinating therapies, and I've learned in my crash course of neurology this past year, um, that taking breaks is super important for brain health and also for focus and attention. So if you want your guests to be paying attention towards the end of the day, you've got to make sure you have adequate breaks. And that doesn't mean nap breaks, but being able to go out and really take quality breaks. And what we tend to do is during our coffee breaks, it's a networking break. So you're still on, you're still working, you're still using brain power. But my breaks now are getting off of a screen and going outside and looking at a tree. You've
Yep.
just got to do something where, you can just turn off, just even if it's just for a few minutes. And that's important. But we are so programmed in this country to, time is money. and we've got to maximize all of our time, and we do, but you can also maximize your content as well.
Right. Yep. This week I have a sty in my right eye, and so I have to put a hot compress, and a washcloth hot compress doesn't work. So the eye doctor gave me the little compress that you put over you heat it in the microwave, and I have to have it on for 8 minutes. And it's actually and I have to do it 4 times a day. So I'm like, it's nice to just lay back. I can't look at anything. And really kind of just breathe in and focus and let my eye heal. And it's amazing how that little 8 minutes of time helps a lot.
And that's also good for brain health as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your crash course of neurology, what else have you learned about brain health?
Wow. That we as event planners, we are using our brain to like the highest level possible. It's crazy that we are just on the go. We're constantly flipping back and forth. When we think of multitasking, sometimes it's not really multitasking. It's just divided attention. It's just how our attention is working. We're flipping back and forth really, really fast. And multitasking is when you actually do 2 things at the same time. So walking and talking is multitasking.
Okay.
But divided attention is listening to a meeting and taking notes, because you're using your verbal skills in 2 different ways. You can't use them at the same time. So I never realized that. Almost just like your computer, you can't be typing 2 Word documents at the same time. You can only type 1 Word document. You can flip back and forth to them very fast, but you can only process 1 verbal activity at a time in your brain. So
that's really
yeah. I'm going to say the other thing is we can adapt and we can learn, and our brains can repair. And so what you're stuck in right now, neuroplasticity is my favorite word now. You can just driving a different way to the office or driving a different way helps your brain. It's good for you to do things differently. So those old checklists, and revise them every time, do things a little differently. It's good for you.
Wow, that's really interesting, because it makes your brain think and makes your brain work in a different way than what your normal daily routine is.
Right. You're out of that automatic pilot, and then you're exercising a new part of your brain. And so it's good for us to do things differently. Yeah, it's not easier, and we don't like to do things easier. We want to do things easier.
Right. But that does end up helping in the long run.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to talk about, you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and you was like, I want to talk about kegged wine and kegged beer and incorporating that into events. And I really like the idea of how that actually pertains to the wellness of the way we leave a city and our planet after an event. So can you talk about a little bit about what you were, I guess, pitching to me or talking to me about?
Yeah. So the idea of kegged wine was new to me until about 5 years ago, when I was helping produce a wedding, and the venue only allowed kegged wine. And it's wine on tap. And I was like, what? And, my client was like, what? So we were very confused about this. We didn't know how this was going to work, in terms of setting up things. And, they said, well, typically people, when they want a glass of wine, they just come up, walk to the bar and get it. And, the client was like, no, we can't have all these people coming, getting up out of their seats and walking to the bar. It's just going to be too complicated. So ultimately what we end up doing is getting carafes, like the glass carafes, and putting them on each of the table, and the table could just pass it and pour, because it was more of a family, it was a cozy wedding. It was appropriate for that wedding. And at the end of the day, we tasted the wine. We went to the vineyard. It was in upstate New York. It was absolutely amazing. And then that got me thinking, why aren't we doing this at every single gathering that we have, at restaurants, at convention centers, caterers? I mean, keg beer, it's a thing. If a fraternity party can have keg beer, we certainly can figure out how to use, wine on tap. And it's actually, from a sustainability perspective, you're not shipping those heavy bottles across the country, across the globe. You have one keg that can be refilled and then shipped. You don't have the wear and tear on your staff having to, lift and carry those big heavy bottles of wine and heavy bottles of beer. And then at the end of the event, you don't end up with the waste of the glass and also the partial bottles of wine that we all know we end up with. I mean, how many of you have had events where you end up with cases of half opened bottles of wine that either you combine into full bottles and hand out to the staff, or that ends up getting trashed, which is a horrible thing to waste. And many municipalities do not recycle glass. They may use them, crush them up and use them in roads, but that's still another item. This saves then the local municipality having to deal, and the venue and the staff that has to deal with it, moving that glass. It's the extra labor to recycle that glass. And in the kegs, the wine will stay fresher. Once you open a bottle of wine, you know that you got to use it up. The keg, because of the gases that are in there, you can reuse that keg for multiple events, for multiple days. And they're not like a big keg that you would see at a fraternity party. They're like half the size and taller and skinnier. They may come in different sizes, but those are the ones that I saw. So if you're at a convention center, or if you're a caterer, or at a restaurant, you can have that and you can use it for multiple days. And once it's opened, you can still use it. And then you don't have the waste at the end of the day. And you can then also have a variety. You don't just have to have one. If you get a case of wine, it's the same bottle of wine for everybody. You could have multiple taps open, multiple kegs open, which is great, which offers a variety without the waste. So I'm all for this. I really hope more restaurants and convention centers and caterers, because you can move them around. It's not something that has to be, stuck in one place. So I think any large gathering should really consider this.
I agree. And one of the things, and that's for a healthier planet, because you're reducing the amount of waste. And while you were talking, I didn't even think about the labels on a bottle, right? I mean, if it's a printed paper label on that wine bottle, what do we do when we recycle it? Right. Because
I think, once it go, I've never followed the paper trail for a recycled bottle, what it goes through, but I'm sure it goes through multiple processes of washing and cleaning and heating before it gets to the final spot.
I'm going to make sure I'm going to post that art. And then I found an article that I sent you from Restaurant Hospitality about how a restaurant in Denver is doing this. And I'm going to share that article here. And it has actually helped, says, as a boon to the business and to the environment. So that restaurant, and he's the first restaurant in Colorado to do it. So I think it's a cool thing. And even because I just recently judged some awards for food and beverage for the Association of Luxury Suite Directors. To me, then that means those food and beverage providers at stadiums could use those kegs and carry them around all over, which typically they're just offering beer. Now they could offer wine.
Absolutely. And it can be in a cart that you can move around. So this is an opportunity to, for fabricators to create mobile, keg systems for beer and wine. But just, the waste of the partial bottles and the empty bottles in the glass is just enormous. And that weighs a lot. And then somebody's got to move that, we're so conditioned to, at an event, sometimes you go up to the bar and they give you a bottle of beer, or they'll pour the wine out of a bottle. But, what's the difference if, you've got a wine glass anyway, if it comes out of a larger vessel, and that's all it is. It's a larger vessel that you're pouring it out of. And the same thing with a beer bottle.
Yeah, very true.
You can still take it and walk away with it. It's not like you're glued to the table. People also like, I noticed with coffee, if there's a China cup, coffee cup or a paper cup, sometimes we'll automatically go for the paper one. You still take it and walk around and drink it, but I think we're just conditioned to do that.
Right, exactly. And I mean, you could have fun with reusable cups, or wine glasses, that you can do. I mean, thinking about food festivals, right? Or wine festivals, that allows them to bring more wine in a smaller kind of environment than bringing bottles of wine.
Right. And I really, again, I hope that this really catches on and more people take advantage of this, because it's much safer. Again, you're not having to open bottles, and if you don't want any, you don't want any contamination with that. And and the glass bottle, it's heavy, it's hard to move around. When you're dealing with large volume and large quantity, if you've ever picked up a case of wine, it's heavy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is. Okay. So sticking with that whole wellness of the planet, what other ways have you seen? Because you also started the food waste, I put that in here somewhere, of DC. And so talk about wellness of the environment when we're talking about food and beverage. What are some things that you've seen?
Something of course that we've been talking about for a long time is that food waste causes food loss and waste when it goes into the landfill is one of the largest emitters of methane, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. So we want to avoid food waste and food loss. And food loss is, food that never makes it to the table. Like if it's damaged in the farm or in transport to the venue or to the catering company. And food waste is food that has been prepared and served that is not eaten or not consumed. So we've been talking about this for many, many years. People are finally catching on that we need to redesign the way we're serving and producing food, so we're not overproducing and creating so much waste. However, a lot of local municipalities depend on donations and the excess food. So as long as we're handling the food safely, it can go on down the line to the next to people to consume it through charities. So it's 2 points. One, we want to stop overproducing. So you're not overbuying, and you're not. So that will save you money. So that means we need to do better at estimating how many people are coming and how much is going to be consumed. And that's just basically a numbers game. It's data. It's looking at your data, looking at what you're serving. And then the second part, again, since charities really do rely on this excess food, making sure that it's handled safely and packaged safely so that it can get downstream to the next human who would be consuming that. So it's a lot of different things. And of course, everybody's talked about, let's stop reducing the, let's say, adding more plant-based items on your menus. That's going to be better for the environment and better for your health. I was telling Tracy that I've been juicing recently. I saw a show and they were talking about the benefits of juicing out from a cellular level. And I'm like, okay, I got to repair all my cells at this point in time. So I just jumped on the juicing train and love it, because I feel like I'm tasting seasons. Like I had something, I was like, oh, this is what spring tastes like, and it was amazing that, because you're getting these fresh fruits and vegetables, and you're squeezing out all the nutrients and then, getting them in one shot. It's almost like getting your, if you're getting an IV versus a pill, you get the IV, the effects of it a lot faster than you would a pill. So I just love it, and maybe, I don't know if it's a mind thing or what, but I just feel like at a cellular level, it just is like, yes, this is good stuff. And so I'm all on that. I on menus that goes, let's say, and serving, and not overproducing.
Okay, so I'm going to jump to the juicing, because I used to actually do juicing demonstrations when I lived in Atlanta and did cooks and worked at Cook's Warehouse. So, do you have a favorite combination of fruits and vegetables?
I do, and it kind of goes with the season, too. But I love,
Yeah.
I have a carrot, apple, ginger, which is like my go-to. That's like
Oh,
the
I would
first.
love
That's
that.
like
Yeah.
that's like the first recipe in my little book that I was like, okay, this is good, and I can do that. It's easy and it's great. But then I do a celery green apple one, which is really good. That's the one that I thought tasted like spring. And then you add some spinach or something in it, and it's
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, yes, tastes so good.
Yeah.
And then there's a lemon ginger one, lemon and ginger,
So good. Mm-hmm.
and that, for inflammation. So, and
Mm-hmm.
these are things, several years ago, I had done juice shots at, as a break in an event.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to do things a little healthier, and they were such a hit. I see it, in Europe, they do, juice shots as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of my stops when I don't have my Vitamix with me, or my Huron juicer, is that I go to Whole Foods and buy their little shots of drinks, of juices as well. And one of theirs is lemon, cayenne, and ginger shot. It's good for the immunity, when you're traveling. But on a daily basis, it's really good, healthy for you as well. So,
Absolutely. And,
mhm.
I add a little sparkling water, and, then you
Oh,
have your
that's a
own
good idea.
soda.
Yeah,
So, fun.
very cool. Okay, so we talked about planet, we talked about people, but okay, the profit wise on this, let's, how does wellness tie into you know the profitability of an event?
Well, because you maintain your people base. And again, without people, you don't have events. So without healthy people, you don't have events. There have been studies, by Honeywell and some of the other larger, engineering companies, that when you're talking about spaces, healthy workplaces retain people, retain your employees. You think about it, if you're in a nice shiny space that feels healthy, it's a much better environment to work in, rather than an old pre-war building that looks like it's falling down, and looks like
Right.
it's got lead paint everywhere. So it's the same thing, in terms of the profitability, with with what we were talking about with wine, if and food waste. If you're not overproducing, and if you're not overbuying, you're spending less money. So that's, a point right there. And yes, it may not be, thousands and thousands of dollars, but it may be thousands of dollars. I mean, you have to look at your numbers, and you have to look at your data to see where are you spending your money, and why are you spending your money this way.
Right.
Coffee is another thing. We spend so much money, brewing coffee, and most of it never gets, drunk and gets spilled down the drain. So why are we overproducing coffee? Really look at your numbers, and you have a 150 person conference. Not everybody's going to drink coffee,
Right.
in the morning or in the afternoon. So you need to know your crowd. Take a coffee RSVP maybe, and get to know them a little better.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah. That would be a fun social media post. How do you like your coffee? Right. I don't like coffee. I like it with caramel cream, or I like it, black, or that would be a fun social post to do for an event, just to garner what your attendees likes and likes and dislikes are. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you may have a crowd that are primarily tea drinkers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you would need to make sure that you have plenty of hot water for that. And, when you're going back to saving, talking about the profit and saving money, again, with venues, they spend money on the energy that we use to produce events. I mean, those costs are passed on to, the hosts, when they're doing the venue rentals. But the energy to brew coffee and to heat water is enormous. There's a lot of, because that's constantly plugged in. So we can think about that, in terms of profit. Yes, it's less money, less energy that we're using. And again, these are nickel and dime things, but you can still think of that. We talked about signage. Can you reuse signs? Are there different ways that you can not print signs?
Right.
Use human wayfinding as opposed to having, a big sign that you print and then are going to be throwing it away the next day.
Right. Exactly. Cool.
Awesome. Just ideas. I mean, again, from a big picture, it might be nickel and diming, but at the end of the day, it does save money. And profitability, you want repeat. You want repeat business. That's where your profit comes in.
Well, and then all of the things that we've talked about today, I mean, putting the health and safety and the wellness of your people and the environment is going to entice people, especially the younger generation is really focused on what we're doing for their health and the planet's health, and which is going to in turn make them fans of you, which is going to in turn bring them back.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think in older generation, a lot of the older generation is looking at some of that as well. So it's not just, the 20 somethings that are doing this, but it is the 30s and 40s and 50s as well. So me being in the 50s, I'm one of those people, Okay. So my last question that I ask everybody, and I think this ties it up into everything that we've talked about today. What does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience look like to you when we're thinking about, health and wellness?
Wow. That's a tough question, but I'll go back to what I was mentioning at the beginning, that having an inclusive, healthy, safe experience for all. So everybody has the same experience and nobody feels like they're, singled out or can't participate in that function because either they can't access the food and beverage, or they can't eat what is being served, because that adds a negative tone to their experience. That changes their experience for the event participating in. But what does it look like for me? Wow. I want everybody to be able to access fresh water, filtered water, not out of a scary 1940s water fountain that's made out of porcelain. We've all seen them. It looks like it would be in your elementary school. We've moved beyond that. We need to give appearance that we are taking health and safety seriously. I want healthy air, as I mentioned, air quality, the lighting. That's, you want to be able to see what you're getting on your buffet, or if it's a plate. So lighting is also important as well. Because as I mentioned to Tracy, I have a crazy allergy, and I can tell if something, just by the cuisine, if it might have, I'm allergic to cilantro, and if it might have something in it, if it's something Southwestern or Indian, there's a chance there might be a garnish of cilantro on it, because chefs love doing that. But they also sneak it in a lot of things. If I can't see, what I'm getting until I taste it, that could be a problem for me. And again, nobody thinks about having that kind of allergy, but I've got to be able to see it in order to see if it's there.
Well, and just to note for people, cilantro comes from, or coriander is cilantro. So it's a spice that's used in a lot of things. I think it's becoming a lot more prevalent as a spice being used in different dishes. So looking at that as well. So if Suzanne shares that she has, or whoever shares that she has a cilantro allergy, it's really important to make sure that you've got that labeled, because that's a hidden ingredient. Yeah.
Oh, it's it's absolutely crazy, because, you don't know every spice that's in, the waiters and the staff, they don't know every spice that the chef puts in there. And chefs just go crazy with this, and it's not such a common thing. But, you generally can tell if it's a spicy dish.
Right.
Yeah, I got to watch out.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you, ma'am. I'm so happy that you joined me today.
You're welcome. And
How
no, I was going to say, healthy spaces are so important to the whole holistic health and safety of an event. And again, move around. Think about it the next time you're hosting an event, you're working an event, or a guest at an event. Can you move around? How could this be designed so you can move around and aren't forced, that you're stuck in the middle of a big room that you can't get up to, so you wouldn't be interrupting or disrupting the event. But you've got to be able to move. I love the ideas of having different kinds of seating so people can stand in the back of the room, on a highboy table, or couches where you can get up and move around, as opposed to being stuck at a table. And, and again, you don't want to be socially awkward. Like if you're at a round of 10 people and all of a sudden you get up, you don't want to be the rude person. But, allowing for that and giving people the opportunity to move is very important.
I love that. Yeah. Somebody used to say, as an attendee, you have the right to use your feet and go to whichever session that you want to, or get up and go to the, move around or whatever you need to do. So I love that. All right. Well, thank you. And everybody, you can find Suzanne at creatingenvironments.com, and you're on LinkedIn as well, right?
Yes.
Yep. And you've got an Instagram handle as well, which is Creating Events. So I hope that you've learned something from Suzanne today. I definitely did. And ma'am, I appreciate you being here. And thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome. And if anybody has any questions, let me know. And, I haven't shared my story too much because it's hard. It's hard for, people who have invisible disabilities to talk about it publicly when when it's so new. Eventually it'll be a little more, it'll be easier for me, but it's out there more than you think. I've in so many groups, and especially at in offices, they're supporting, groups of people who have invisible disabilities. So please, be supportive of your colleagues, of your coworkers, of your guests, of your staff who might need a little extra, who ask for a little extra help. And it's not that, because it's not that they want to be a burden, but we can do better for everybody. And that includes the setups of our food and beverage, what we're serving, how we're serving it, how we're designing spaces. And so help each other out. Again, it's more than you think. Quiet spaces are important as well, that you can duck into to just get away from the
big time
busyness.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Tracy.
You're welcome, everybody. I will be here next week, same time, same bat channel, with Chef Nina Curtis. And she is a plant-based chef out of California, and we're going to talk about that and her new role. So I'm excited to bring her to you. So until then, stay safe and eat well, and enjoy your eating at a meeting.